Hi everybody, Scott Stanchfield here. Let's see how we can use NFC tags inside of an Android application. We're going to start by trying to read those tags. Let's start by going into our layout and tweaking it so we have an ID on that text field that they generate. We'll just call it text. And while I'm in here, let me change this to a linear layout, otherwise I'm going to forget later on when I tweak this. Let's go ahead and get that field. And we'll make him a field inside this class. And let's try to handle a tag that might be coming in to start up this activity. So I'm going to say process NFC, passing in the intent that comes into us. Now, where does that intent come from? We're going to have to set up a couple intent filters on this activity to be able to catch the intents that are created when a tag is scanned and passed to us. So let's go and take a look at our manifest. Here we're going to need to set up some intent filters to describe which NFC intents we're going to catch. So I'm going to add in a new intent filter block. Let me just copy this one. And our action, unfortunately we can't use content assist for this, so I'm going to have to type this thing in, as painful as that is, and it's going to be android.nfc.action ndef discovered. Okay, that wasn't too bad. We need to make sure that we have category default because these are implicit intents, otherwise it won't pick up that implicit intent. And now let's decide what type of filtering we want to do on this. I'm going to try to catch two types of intents. One for a piece of plain text, another one for an http://javadude.com URI. So let's start inside here by giving a data tag, and I'm going to define a MIME type of text plain. This should catch a tag that has plain text on it with that MIME type set. Let's create another one, and instead of using a MIME type, let's use scheme HTTP, and we'll have host javadude.com. So this one should catch an NFC tag that has a URI on it that starts with http://javadude.com. Back over in our main activity, let's define what this process NFC looks like. We need to ask that intent for the list of ndef messages that are encoded on it. So I'm going to say intent.get parcelable array extra NFC adapter .extra ndef messages. So this should give me the messages that are encoded as parcelables. So let me make that be messages. And once we have those messages, let's walk through them. Well, the first thing I want to do is let me clear out that text view on the screen. So I'll say text view set text to nothing. And then we'll say if we have messages, let's process them. So we'll walk through those messages. And we're going to need to cast them so that we can actually use them. So we'll say ndef message equals message. Once we have that message, we can get the records out of it. So I'll say for ndef record in ndef message get records. And then once we have the record, let's take a look and see what type of record it is. The first thing we need to take a look at is the type name format field. So I like to use a switch statement on this. We'll just say switch record.getTNF. And inside there, let's take a look at ndef record.tnf well-known. Well-known TNFs represent a record that's fairly compressed and fairly simple to read for some common types like URI and text. You can get much fancier on this and put your own formatting in it or use some custom formatting. And there's a few older formats that are used that you can also read, but this is the easiest way to look for text or URIs. Let's go ahead and append to our text view well known. And then let's take a look at what actual type of data is inside there. So we're going to look at the record type, which is a small array of bytes that uniquely identifies the record type of a well-known record. So we'll say if arrays dot equals record dot get type, and then we'll compare that to ndef record dot rtd text. We'll see if we see some text. We can do the same type of thing for rtd URI. So this should match that text that's coming in. This should match that URI that's coming in. So let's go ahead and print out some stuff here. So we'll say this is going to be text. And then let's print the actual text from that record. So I'll say record.getPayload. And payload gives us an array of bytes. Let's convert it into a string. Let's say new string like that. And that should print it on the screen. Let's go ahead and do a new line at the end of all this. And we'll do something similar for URI, just so we can see what's actually been printed. This should give us enough to be able to just read a tag using intents. Let's give it a try. So here's our application running. I'm running this on a Nexus 7 tablet, which has an NFC chip, and I'm using MobiZen to do screen mirroring. MobiZen does a little bit better job of mirroring the screen than Visor does, so I decided to use it for this example. Let's see what happens when I tap a tag. I'm going to start by tapping a text tag here. And we'll see that it came up saying well-known text. Note that this actually pushed a new instance of the activity on top of us. So if I hit back here, it'll go back to that initial instance of the activity. Let me go out to the home screen. And if I tap again, it opens up the activity. Now let's do the same type of thing for a tag that's formatted with a URI. Notice here we get the disambiguation dialog. It's telling us we can run it using NFC and we can also run it using Chrome. That's because both of these are configured to be able to handle URLs. So I'm going to say go ahead and run it with NFC. I'm just going to hit the just once button. And we'll see that it prints out the well-known URI javadude.com. So far so good. We can give ourselves a little more control of this by doing foreground reading of NFC tags. And what this means is inside the activity, when the activity is running, he's given preference for reading any tags that we set up intent filters for. This will allow us to avoid that disambiguation dialog, and it'll also allow us to avoid having a separate instance of the activity pushed on top of the stack. So let me get out of here. The first thing we need to do is get NFC permission. I'm going to go back to my manifest, and we're going to add in a uses permission for the NFC permission. This permission is not marked as a dangerous permission in Android, so we don't need to deal with it in the runtime model. We only need to deal with it inside of our Android manifest. So now that I've declared him, I'm going to go back to my activity, and we can set up our foreground dispatch mode. We're going to do some prep up in our onCreate. The first thing we need to do is set up what intent we want to send when an NFC tag is actually recognized. We're going to create a simple intent here. And this intent is going to just come back to me. By passing in getClass, we're making this an explicit intent to come back to this same activity. But I want to do something else here. I don't want to have a new instance of the activity stacked on top of me. So I want to call intent.addFlags intent.flag activity single top. And what that says is if I already have an instance of that activity on the top of my stack, just reuse it. In order to get the intent, instead of it coming and creating a new instance of the activity and onCreate being called, it's going to call a method called onNewIntent. So if we're already running, onNewIntent will be called. If we're not already running, onCreate will be called. What that means is we need to put a copy of this process NFC in my onNewIntent, so that if I'm already running, I get my new intent for my new tag, I can process it. Next, we need to set up a pending intent to say that I want to launch an activity using this intent. So I'm going to say pending intent dot get activity, passing in this is the context, request code, the intent that we want to call, and then any flags we want to use. I'm just going to use pending intent dot flag update current, so that if we end up registering this pending intent multiple times, it'll just overwrite itself. So there's my pending intent. This pending intent is going to be needed when we set up our foreground dispatching, so I'm going to make him a field. Now let's set up our intent filters. I'm going to do these programmatically as opposed to in the manifest, so that we can pass them in to say, hey, foreground dispatch, here's the tags you're looking for. We can do that by saying new intent filter and pass in the action we want. So Nfc adapter dot action ndef discovered. So if we see an ndef formatted tag, this is what we're going to want to watch for. And let's just call this one JavaDude filter. Now in the JavaDude filter, I want to add in the scheme and host like we did before. So to do that, I say JavaDude filter dot add data scheme HTTP, and then we'll also say add data authority javadude.com, and we'll pass in null for the port, so we're just going to use the default port on that. There's my filter that matches tags that have http://javadude.com with any path after it. Let's create a copy of that for the text one. I'll just call it text filter. And this one's a little simpler. All I got to do is pass in text plain. And then we need to surround this in a try catch, because he's going to say malformed MIME type exception is a possibility. It's going to go ahead and move all of these down inside my try catch. And in order to use these two intent filters, I need to create an array of them to pass in when I'm asking to enable foreground dispatch. So I'm going to say new intent filter, bracket, bracket, curly, JavaDude filter, and text filter. I'll call those read filters. And let's change him into a field. So that's the setup that I need. This should set it up so that I have the data I need to enable my foreground read. Let's set up a little method to enable foreground read. I'll say enable read. And inside there we can say Nfc adapter.getDefaultAdapter for this context. And I'm going to call enable foreground dispatch. Passing in me, passing in the pending intent, passing in the read filters, and we'll pass in null for the techlist parameter. The techlist parameter allows us to say which types of tags we want to accept, even if they're not ndef formatted. So we'll get an action tech discovered intent coming to us instead of an action ndef. And if we know how to parse those other formats, we can do so. In this case, we're using ndef, so we don't have to worry about that. Let's set up a little method to disable. And we can just do that. So now we have an enable and a disable. Let's enable when our activity is resumed and disable when our activity is paused. So in on resume, I'm going to do an enable read. And in on pause, I'm going to do a disable read. And before we run this, I just noticed down here in my on new intent, I've actually called process NFC passing in get intent. And that's not going to work. what's going to happen is if I start up my activity, the first time the intent is not going to be an NFC intent, and so that won't do anything for us. When we get this on new intent, we're just going to keep passing in that bad intent, and it's not going to help us. So what I really want to do is tweak this to say pass in the intent that I got from on new intent. So let's try running this. Now our application's running. I'm going to take a text tag and tap it. And you'll notice that we didn't get a new instance of the activity running here. If I hit back, I just go back to the home screen. From the home screen, if I tap that text tag, it still opens up the app using the intent filter that was specified in the manifest. Now let me try tapping a javadude.com tag, and boom, we'll see that that read the tag and put its text on there. Again, if I hit back, I just come back out. So we've now got this set up so that it's properly handling foreground reads. It's much more efficient for us, and we don't have that disambiguation dialog come up for the URL. We're saying that we definitely want to handle HTTP requests as long as this app is open. And that's fine because the user is in the application and tapping a tag, so they know that they're having that application handle the tag.